Hello everyone, and welcome to part 5 of my filament calibration guide, specifically for a 0.2 nozzle and the intention to print miniatures. In the last episode we have finally talked about the pressure advance, and today I want to discuss the final steps of our calibration. If you have been following the guide up until this point, then you should now be able to get a perfect first layer, calibrate your temperature and flow ratio, and calibrate your pressure advance. This only leaves us with, well, nothing, really. As far as the filament calibration goes, we have covered the most important steps. There are a few more settings that we could discuss, but it's important to distinguish between what I like to call preemptive settings and reactive settings. Preemptive settings are the ones that we've covered so far, adjustments that will, at least in theory, prevent certain issues from occurring in the first place. Reactive settings, on the other hand, are the ones that you really should only be tinkering with if you're actively trying to solve a problem that you weren't able to fix otherwise using the preemptive settings. A good example for this would be stringing. If you've dried your filament and adjusted your temperatures and you still get stringing, then it might be a good idea to take a closer look at either your retraction or C-hop settings, or both. However, I don't consider them to inherently be linked to the filament calibration, which is why I won't include them here. But, given that part 5 even exists, that implies that we're not fully done yet. Right now, I'd say that you're probably sitting at around 90 to 95% of your printer's quality potential. Why not 100%? Well, that is because it's very unlikely for you to have successfully calibrated everything on your first attempt. By that, I don't mean that you've made a mistake, but rather that the ranges you have calculated for the calibration are still not as narrow as they could be. So how do we fix that? You could just rerun the entire calibration, using what you've calculated so far as your new baseline. You narrow the ranges, examine the results, and adjust your parameters. Then you use those new parameters to rerun the calibration again, and this time making the range even more narrow. Then you repeat that again, and again, and again, until you're eventually satisfied. I don't recommend doing this for several reasons, but I'll go over just the two big ones. The first one is that even during our first run, we've already had to use tricks to make the evaluation possible. Priming the flow ratio plates with an off-white primer to highlight imperfections, or to use Q-tips to verify the stability of the pressure advance lines. If we narrow the ranges down even further, then these results are going to become even more inconclusive, to a point where they will eventually be almost impossible to differentiate. Fortunately, there is a second way to reach our goal, and that is linked to something that I haven't been entirely honest about with you. Something that I intentionally neglected to mention up until this point. Because the thing about calibration is that you don't really stop calibrating, at least not for a while. What you've done so far should cover most of the calibration, so it is time to switch from the active calibration to a more passive one. Let's be honest, for most of us, calibration is not something that we do for fun. It is a bit of a chore, something that we have to do so that we can improve upon what we actually want to do, printing miniatures. And that is exactly what I want you to do now. To start printing the stuff that you actually want to print, and then make small adjustments as you go on. Get yourself a nice model that you've been wanting to print for a while and start. Once the first couple of prints have finished, you take a closer look at the results using the knowledge that you have obtained throughout the active calibration. If you still have some slight stringing, adjust the temperature by just 2 or maybe 3 degrees. if your nozzle has a slight filament buildup after a long print, then you probably still have a very minor overextrusion, so you adjust the flow ratio by perhaps 0.01. It is important to use very small values here, because if we were to use the same increments that we've used before for the active calibration, you would instantly overshoot it. So be patient, make small, minor adjustments as you go on, and eventually you'll reach a point where everything is just right. This method is less scientific and technical than the previous ones, but at the end of the day, you gotta ask yourself whether you want to spend your time calibrating or actually using the calibration to print what you want to print. It usually takes me around 5 to 7 prints to settle on the values I come up with, and after that, assuming that you don't change the filament and that the manufacturer doesn't change anything either, you won't have to worry about calibration again. A few things that I want to point out before I move on to the next topic. These are just 3 things that apply to the previous parts that I want to clarify. After you have calibrated your flow ratio, you want to deactivate the auto calibration right before you send a print to the printer, as to not overwrite the values. The same applies to a lesser extent to the auto leveling, especially if you have used a G-code adjustment for the Z offset. If you're getting a perfect first layer and you haven't moved the print plate, then there really is no reason to re-level the whole thing. It would just introduce a potential misalignment. So make sure to uncheck that box as well. Last but not least, it might be a good idea to purchase more than one 0.2 nozzle. Some clogs are so stubborn that they are virtually impossible to remove. It's rare, and to put it into perspective, it only happened twice or 3 times in my over 6,000 hours of printing, but it does happen. Replacement nozzles are fairly cheap, especially if they are off-brand, so if it's within your budget, I'd say you should buy 1 or 2, have them lying around at home just in case you need them. And as far as the calibration guide goes, this is pretty much it. I hope that I was able to help at least a few of you watching this, and if you have any further questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. The rest of the video is going to focus on the future of this channel, as well as the upcoming projects that I have already planned. So if you're not interested in that and you've only been here because of the calibration, then feel free to close the video now. But if you are interested, then stay a while and listen. When this part goes live, I will also be releasing version 2.0 of my high quality settings. I have shared some of the results already, and I'll highlight a few more, as well as some prints that have been printed with the previous versions. These settings and their full documentation will first be released on the FDM miniature subreddit and added to the wiki, as well as the pinned posts, but I'll leave a link in the description just to be safe. Eventually, I will be releasing a video about these settings. However, that video is mostly going to be complimentary, where I'll explain the importance of specific settings. For the full settings, you'll have to check out the written guide, as it would simply be too much for a single video. That will be the first next big project that is already planned for the channel. The second project would be a review for 3D printing tools and additional equipment. Specifically, a review for Bambu's new Pro version of their SuperTech plate, which I've acquired a few weeks ago, and that has pleasantly surprised me. After that though, the future of the channel is not fully decided yet. Recently, we've hit over 300 subscribers, and even though that in the grand scheme of things this isn't much for a YouTube channel, it does mean a lot to me, and I want to thank each and every one of you for your support and encouragement, because without it, I doubt that I would have finished all of these guides. I want to keep doing the content that I like, because it is something that I am very passionate about. However, there are only so many guides I could write and record, that haven't already been discussed a million times over elsewhere on the internet by people with both more knowledge as well as more resources than me. I don't just want to take what equates to a wiki article and turn that into a video essay. But there is something that I do have in mind that I would like to do. And that would be to review models, specifically based on their printability for FDM printers. The idea behind the project would be to highlight what design elements either make or break a model when it comes to FDM printing. I'd also go into detail about how certain shapes and the geometry of the model itself impacts the quality of your print, so that hopefully you can estimate whether a model is worth your time without the frustration that comes with the usual trial and error. Essentially, the purpose would be to not only teach what works and what doesn't for FDM printing, but also why, so that you can filter out all of the stuff that'll just make you upset, basically. The only problem I see with a project like that is that it is far more abstract than something like a calibration guide. Printing miniatures with an FDM printer is already a niche, and giving what is essentially a class in FDM-specific art design might be too much of a niche within a niche to have an audience. So I figured the best way to figure it out would be to ask my current audience. I'd probably do at least a couple of videos in this format simply to see whether I like it, but I still want to know, is that something that you'd be interested in? And if not, please share what you would be interested in the comments section. I also considered a vlog style format where I simply paint some models and give a commentary about my thoughts and ideas regarding certain topics within the FDM miniature hobby scene. But while I do enjoy a good yapping session as much as the next guy, this might just be a tiny bit too pretentious. So I'm asking you, is there anything in particular that you'd like me to cover next? Be that more guides or reviews or just some commentary? I want to thank all of you for your support and feedback. Although it's still a very small channel in the grand scheme of things, I am very happy with where I am right now. And if my guides were able to help at least some of you, that is good enough for me. With that, I'm gonna end it here for today, say goodbye, and as always, take care and have fun printing.